Picture the scene. It is the morning of the third day at Thermopylae. 300 Spartans have held a narrow mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. 2 days of brutal, close-quarters combat. The ground is carpeted with Persian dead. And that morning, before the Spartans take their positions one final time, they don't eat. Not because there is no food, but because this is exactly how they trained for 20 years. And they are, by every account we have, performing at their absolute peak. Now walk into any gym, open any fitness app, scroll through any nutrition channel, and you will hear a version of the same advice. Eat before you train. Fuel your performance. Never go to battle on an empty stomach. Your body needs constant input to function at its best. The Spartans would have found this baffling. And here is why this matters to you directly. Because if you are reading the same advice, following the same programs, eating the same where you have been told to eat, and you are still tired, still not recovering the way you used to, and still feeling like your body is working against you rather than for you, there is a reason for that. The framework you were handed is incomplete. It was built to sell products, not to build performance. And it leaves out something the Spartans understood so clearly, they built their entire civilization around it. They were the most feared warriors in the ancient world. They trained hungry, competed hungry, fought hungry, and they built the most dominant military machine Greece had ever produced. Not despite the empty stomach, but partly because of it. So if everything you have been told about fueling performance is built on assumptions the Spartans systematically dismantled 2,500 years ago, the real question is, what did they know that we don't? The answer starts somewhere nobody would expect. Not on a battlefield, but in a barracks, with a 7-year-old boy being handed deliberately insufficient food and being told to figure out the rest himself. In ancient Sparta, the Agoge was the state-run education and training system that every Spartan male entered at the age of 7. Not because their parents chose it, but because the state required it. Boys were taken from their families and would not live at home again for 23 years. The Agoge was brutal in ways that make modern military boot camps look comfortable. Boys slept on reeds they cut themselves from the riverbank. They wore a single cloak year-round, in winter, which in the Peloponnese can drop below freezing. They were beaten. They competed constantly. And according to Plutarch, writing in the 1st century AD from records and oral traditions dating to the classical period, they were intentionally underfed. This was not neglect, it was policy. The boys were given rations deliberately smaller than they needed. Then they were told they could supplement by stealing. But if caught, and Plutarch is clear about this, they were beaten severely. Not for stealing, for getting caught. The punishment was for the failure of stealth. A Spartan who needed food and couldn't acquire it without detection was a Spartan who would get his entire unit killed. A story told by Plutarch, a Greek philosopher, captures all of this in a single image. A Spartan boy stole a live fox and hid it under his cloak. Rather than reveal the theft and face punishment, he stood perfectly still while the fox gnawed through his stomach. He died before he made a sound. Whether the story is literally true or culturally symbolic, it carries the exact lesson the Agoge intended. Control, silence, and the mastery of pain over panic. But the deliberate hunger was not only about stealth, it was about building something far more specific. Something the Spartans could not name, but experienced every single day of their training. Something modern science now calls a predatory state. And understanding what that actually means will change how you think about your body entirely. When you eat a full meal, your body shifts into what physiologists call the parasympathetic state. Rest and digest. Blood is routed to your gut. Insulin rises, your heart rate slows, and your brain, in a very real sense, just settles. The body has food, the immediate threat of scarcity is gone. So now, it can afford to relax. This is a deeply comfortable state. It is also, if you are about to fight for your life, the worst possible state to be in. When you have not eaten, the opposite happens. The body activates the sympathetic nervous system. This is the system responsible for fight or flight. Here is what that activation actually does. Adrenaline and noradrenaline flood the bloodstream. A study from 2003 published in the journal Physiology and Behavior found that fasted subjects exposed to a stressful environment showed significantly higher noradrenaline responses than fed subjects, making them sharper, faster, and more aggressive. Research from the same period found that urinary noradrenaline and adrenaline levels rose measurably during short-term fasting. And a study from 2007 in healthy humans confirmed that even 72 hours of food restriction reliably increased catecholamine output and heightened sympathetic nervous system activity. What do those hormones actually do? They sharpen sensory perception. They increase pain tolerance. They accelerate reaction time. They pull blood away from digestion and route it directly to muscle and brain. They prime the body for immediate, aggressive output. They create, in plain language, a state of predatory focus that no pre-workout supplement on the market has ever replicated, because no supplement triggers the sympatho-adrenal cascade that genuine hunger does. The Spartans had no name for catecholamines. They had no concept of the sympathetic nervous system. What they had was 20 years of documented observation. Boys were raised on deliberate hunger, tested constantly, beaten when they failed, and observed to perform better when the pressure was highest. Not in spite of the empty stomach, but with the empty stomach as the mechanism. They built warriors who were, in the most literal biological sense, permanently running on a predatory hormonal profile. The question was, what did they put in the body when they did feed it? Because the answer to that is one of the strangest and most fascinating things in all of ancient history. You see, the Spartans ate once per day, in the evening, together, always together. The syssitia, the communal mess, was not optional. Even Spartan kings ate there. The communal meal was a daily restatement of Spartan values, equality, austerity, brotherhood. And the centerpiece of that meal, documented by Plutarch and mentioned by historians from Pherecrates in the 5th century BC to Cicero writing in Latin, was something called melas zomos, black broth. The recipe, as best historians can reconstruct it, was simple. Pork simmered in its own blood with vinegar and salt until the pot turned almost ink dark. No seasoning for pleasure, no refinement. A visiting aristocrat from Sybaris, a city famous throughout the ancient world for its luxury and its food, tasted the black broth and made a comment that Plutarch recorded, and which has survived 2,500 years. He said that now he understood why Spartan warriors had no fear of death. Death, he concluded, had to be preferable to eating this every night. For some reason, the Spartans took this as a compliment, but what was actually in the black broth nutritionally? The iron content from the blood would have been extraordinary. Hem iron, the most bioavailable form, directly from the source. The vinegar, which prevented the blood from clotting during cooking and preserved the broth without refrigeration, also lowered the overall glycemic response of the meal. The pork provided dense protein and fat. The barley, added to some versions, contributed slow-release carbohydrate with a low insulin response. What the black broth didn't do was spike blood sugar. It didn't trigger a prolonged insulin response. It didn't divert blood to the gut for hours. It fed the body efficiently, allowed rapid recovery from the day's training, and then, as the fast resumed from the evening meal until the following evening, allowed the metabolic and hormonal benefits of the fasted state to accumulate again. There is a word for what their metabolic system had become after 20 years of this training. The word is flexible. A metabolically flexible body can burn fat cleanly when no food is available. It can switch to glucose for explosive effort when required. It doesn't crash when supply drops. It doesn't panic It simply adapts because adaptation has been trained into it since childhood, through the relentless repetition of going without. This is not starvation. This is conditioning. And the distinction matters enormously, because what the Spartan Agoge was really building, underneath the physical toughness and the military skills and the bronze armor, was a body that had permanently learned to function at its best when the environment was at its worst. And that, it turns out, was only the first half of what the empty stomach was building. The Spartans didn't separate the body from the mind. To them, mastery of one was inseparable from mastery of the other. And the test of that mastery was always, at its foundation, hunger. If you cannot manage appetite, the most fundamental biological drive, the one your body screams about the most urgently, you cannot control anything. That was the Spartan belief. And they built their entire education system around proving it, every single day, from the age of 7. Contrast this with the modern reality. We eat while distracted, barely tasting what we are consuming. We silence hunger within minutes of feeling it, before it has any chance to teach us anything. We have engineered a world where almost no one ever sits with physical discomfort, long enough to learn that it passes, that it becomes something manageable, then something useful, then something that sharpens rather than weakens. The Spartan warrior standing at Thermopylae on that final morning was not suppressing fear. He was operating, psychologically and hormonally, in a state that modern neuroscience now confirms was genuinely superior for performance. Sharper perception, higher pain tolerance, tighter focus. The sympathetic nervous system was fully activated, and the hormonal cascade of genuine hunger did exactly what 2,500 years of warfare had shown it would do. This is what modern fitness can never sell you, not because it does not work, because it does not require purchasing anything. So what does it actually mean for how you live? You don't need to fight at Thermopylae. The biology is identical. Start with this. Train fasted in the morning, at least twice a week, not for hours. 30 to 45 minutes of bodyweight work, a walk, or a moderate session. No food beforehand, just water. What you will notice within 2 weeks of consistency is not weakness. It is exactly what the Spartans noticed across 23 years of the Agoge. Sharpness, a quality of attention that simply is not present when the body is busy digesting. The second thing is to extend the time between your last meal and your first. You do not need to eat the black broth. Eating within a 12 to 16 hour window is closer to how the human body evolved to operate than eating from the moment you wake until the moment you sleep. Every serious civilization before the industrial era ate this way, not as philosophy, but as default. It was the body's baseline, though we traded it for convenience. The third is the hardest. Sit with hunger occasionally, without immediately fixing it. Not dangerously, not for days, but when you feel the pull to eat out of boredom or habit rather than genuine need, pause. Observe it. Let it last 30 minutes. Then decide. The Spartans did not need willpower in battle because they had spent 20 years practicing exactly this moment, thousands of times, until the ability to override impulse became automatic. The body is not fragile. The body is adaptable. It becomes what you repeatedly ask it to become. The Spartans did not fight best despite the empty stomach. They fought best because of what the empty stomach had built over a lifetime. A hormonal state of predatory focus. A metabolic flexibility that modern athletes pay coaches thousands to develop. And a psychological relationship with discomfort so deeply conditioned that hunger, cold, pain, and fear simply did not function as obstacles anymore. They had, through 23 years of deliberate practice, made the most fundamental human weakness into a weapon. The modern world will keep telling you to fuel constantly, to never let yourself feel depleted, to treat every biological discomfort as a problem requiring an immediate commercial solution. That approach sells a great many products. It does not produce the body or the mind those 300 men possessed at Thermopylae. The Spartan secret was never about the black broth, or the Agoge, or the cold cloak in winter. It was about understanding that the body follows what the mind demands, and that the mind only learns to demand more when it has been taught, repeatedly and deliberately, that less is survivable, more than survivable, optimal. If this kind of forgotten knowledge is what you are looking for, subscribe. There is far more where this came from, and most of it has been sitting in plain sight for 2,000 years.